school shooting in South Florida. This took place in Parkland, Florida, at Douglas High School. No word yet on casualties, but the reporter is still at large. We have been watching students coming out of that high school.
On a warm February 14th, 2018, the sun shone over Parkland, Florida, promising another Valentine's Day full of flowers, chocolates, and sweet notes exchanged between loved ones. But for the students and staff at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, this day would become one of the darkest in American history.
Is anybody injured?
Yes.
What began as a normal afternoon quickly turned into the deadliest mass shooting ever recorded at a U.S. high school. By the time the chaos ended, 17 lives had been stolen and dozens more left wounded, leaving families shattered and the nation reeling. Across news outlets and social media, people struggled to understand how a place of learning could transform into a scene of unimaginable horror.
It looked like there was a tent set up. We could see at least one person on a stretcher there, and also what appeared to be a triage center with those blankets on the ground there. So a heavy.
That afternoon, precisely at 2:06 p.m., 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz slipped into the backseat of an Uber and told the driver to take him to his old high school. 13 minutes later, the car pulled up near the sprawling campus. Cruz paid his fare, waved the driver goodbye, hoisted a large backpack onto his shoulders, paused to glance around, and then walked with a steady pace toward Building 12. A security guard on patrol spotted him, noted the bulge of the bag, and alerted a colleague. The second guard listened but dismissed the warning as nothing serious, just a student's oversized bag. Within seconds, that dismissive moment vanished under the sound of the first gunshots echoing through the hallways.
The massacre left 17 dead and 17 wounded.
At exactly 2:21 p.m., Cruz reached the east stairwell door of Building 12. He swung it open, stepped inside, and closed it quietly behind him, still carrying the rifle hidden in his black, soft case. Ascending the stairway, he passed a student and gave him a brief nod, an almost casual gesture that belied the horror about to begin.
He said to me, "Get out of here. Things are about to get bad."
Emerging on the next floor, Cruz unzipped his case, lifted out the .223 caliber AR-15 style rifle, took a deep breath as though steeling himself, and then unleashed a barrage of shots down the hallway. The student he had nodded to dove for cover and sprinted to warn a nearby teacher. Moments later, the school's code red alarm blared, announcing an active shooter on campus. What followed was chilling in its calculated cruelty. Within a minute of opening fire, Cruz triggered the school's fire alarm system. The shrill bells and flashing lights forced nearly 3,000 students and staff out of their classrooms into the wide, exposed corridors, exactly where an armed attacker could do the most damage. Cruz methodically moved through 4 different classrooms, firing rounds into rooms filled with terrified students and teachers. In those cramped spaces, chairs were overturned and desks splintered, sending shards of wood flying through the air. The once bright walls, adorned with student artwork and class schedules, quickly became stained with blood. In less than 6 minutes, a massacre had unfolded, and the school erupted into chaos. Pandemonium seized the campus. Some students huddled silently under desks or barricaded themselves behind locked doors. Others bolted toward exits, scrambling over fences to find refuge beyond the school grounds. In a surreal scene of desperation, small groups of teens darted toward the parking lot, then ran towards a nearby Walmart for shelter. Inside, shoppers and employees heard frantic whispers and saw students collapse into their arms, tears streaking down faces smeared with dust. Parents, unaware of the exact location of their children, flooded social media with desperate pleas. Overturned chairs and blood-stained floors became haunting images on Instagram and Twitter. As rescue workers arrived, 12 victims lay dead inside the building. 2 more fell outside on school property, and another was struck down in the street. 2 additional victims would later die in hospital, bringing the tragic death toll to 17. Meanwhile, at 2:22 p.m., School Resource Deputy Scott Peterson was stationed near the administration building just across the quad. He had no idea that within seconds the school would become a war zone. At that moment, the first frantic call for help crackled into the Coral Springs Communications Center, marking the start of a race against time. Less than 60 seconds after that call, Peterson heard the thunderous pop of gunfire echoing through the halls. He grabbed his radio, his voice tense as he alerted dispatch. "Shots fired in Building 12. Active shooter. We need backup immediately." His words carried the weight of grim reality. This was more than a fight. It was a desperate struggle for survival. By 2:25 p.m., a Broward County Sheriff's deputy who had been training nearby rushed toward Building 12. Peterson moved swiftly too, barking orders for a full lockdown. "Secure all doors. Get everyone off the hallways." At the same time, a Coral Springs police officer called dispatch to confirm the active shooter report. The operator's voice trembled as she described the flood of 911 calls. "Ma'am, we're getting endless calls. Students screaming, teachers crying. It's a nightmare." As sirens wailed closer, the urgency of the crisis became all too clear. Just 2 minutes later, at 2:27 p.m., the first Coral Springs officer arrived on the scene, stepping into a school gripped by panic. Peterson directed him to the east entrance and ordered other officers to form a perimeter, blocking anyone from entering the building. He knew every second counted. Inside, crews had climbed to the third floor via the same stairwell he had entered. Now, with his heart pounding and gunfire behind him, he dropped the rifle and backpack on a landing and sprinted down the stairs, tears mixing with sweat as he threw himself into a crowd of fleeing students. By 2:29 p.m., descriptions of the suspect began to emerge over police radios. A white male wearing an ROTC uniform with a burgundy shirt. Broward deputies attempted to breach the locked doors of Building 13, mistakenly following rumors that crews had fled that way. Meanwhile, Coral Springs officers fanned out across the campus, calling out for students to stay calm and move to safety. The entire area felt like a pressure cooker. Pain, fear, and confusion compressed into every hallway and classroom. At 2:30 p.m., deputies received word that the suspect might be hiding in a nearby 3-story building. Officers from both Coral Springs and Broward County assembled into a breach team. 11 minutes after those first shots rang out, that team finally forced open the door to Building 12. They pushed inside with weapons drawn, each step revealing the scene of devastation: bullet-pocked walls, broken glass, and the trail of destruction left by crews. Law enforcement moved swiftly, calling for medics and searching every classroom for injured or trapped students. Over 30 minutes after fleeing the building, at 2:50 p.m., Cruz reappeared in civilian life when he slipped into a nearby Walmart. He strolled to the food court, bought a drink at the Subway, and then wandered outside to a McDonald's across the street. He sat for less than a minute, blending in with late afternoon shoppers before vanishing again. As ordinary customers blissfully ate their meals, law enforcement was closing in on the scene, their vehicles now lining the campus driveways. By 3:11 p.m., dozens of police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances had converged on Marjory Stoneman Douglas. The FBI arrived alongside SWAT teams, cordoning off streets and urging onlookers to back away. Grieving parents clustered at makeshift command posts waiting for news. On the White House lawn, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders told reporters that President Trump was fully briefed in monitoring the situation. Yet even with that national spotlight, the gunman remained at large, and every minute that passed deepened the pain and uncertainty. At 3:40 p.m., after hours of frantic searching and rescue, the sheriff's office began to release students. Buses rolled in, ready to carry frightened teens to a nearby hotel where families anxiously waited. For many, the moment of reunion was a mixture of relief and raw grief. Tears flowed freely as parents embraced children covered in dust and dried blood. Moments later, at 3:41 p.m., a vigilant Coconut Creek police officer patrolling a quiet neighborhood spotted a young man matching the radio description. With a witness's help, he confirmed the identity and moved in for the arrest. There was no struggle. Cruz was taken into custody peacefully. Security footage from the school confirmed within minutes that the man in custody was indeed the shooter. Authorities transported him to Broward Health North for evaluation. He complained of breathing difficulties and then escorted him to the sheriff's office in handcuffs and a hospital gown. Investigators recovered his rifle and backpack, and Cruz began to speak, admitting he had carried out the attack. As evening fell, law enforcement teams meticulously swept every hallway and classroom, ensuring no one was left behind. Broward County Public Schools Superintendent Robert Runcie faced reporters to say there had been no warning or threats before the shooting, no signs that could have foreshadowed the horror. The community, reeling from grief and anger, demanded answers and action. At 5:18 p.m., Governor Rick Scott arrived in Broward County to offer solace and support. He met with families of victims, first responders, and school officials, promising changes to prevent another tragedy. By 6 p.m., the world knew the shooter's name, Nicholas Cruz, a former student who had once roamed those same halls. Clad in a hospital gown, he was booked into the Broward County Jail, where he confessed to the killings and led officers to the discarded weapon. As night fell over Parkland, the school district announced Marjory Stoneman Douglas would remain closed for the rest of the week, giving a shaken community time to mourn, heal, and begin the long road toward recovery. 14 of the victims lost their lives inside Building 12. 3 more were either fatally wounded and died on the way to the hospital or shortly after arriving there. The number of lives lost was staggering, 17 in total. But beyond the numbers were the names, the faces, and the stories of incredible courage and heartbreaking sacrifice. One of the fallen was Scott Bagel, a geography teacher who was trying to protect his students in the final moments of his life. When chaos erupted and students were running for safety, Bagel opened his classroom door to let them in. He didn't think of himself, he just acted. That simple act of selflessness cost him his life. He was shot and killed before he could shut the door behind them. His actions, though, undoubtedly saved many others. Another brave soul who gave his life that day was Aaron Feiss. He was not only an assistant football coach, but also served as a security guard at the school. When he heard there was an active shooter on campus, Feiss didn't hesitate. He ran toward the building, trying to help. That instinct, to protect, to intervene, was fatal. He was shot while attempting to shield students from the gunfire. Those who knew him weren't surprised by his heroism. It was who he was. Chris Hickson, the school's athletic director, was also among the fallen. Like Feiss, he heard the gunfire and ran straight toward it. His mission was clear: help the students, no matter the cost. He died doing exactly that. Then there was Peter Wang, a 15-year-old student in the school's Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps, JROTC program. On that tragic afternoon, Peter was seen wearing his JROTC uniform. But what truly stood out was what he did. As students fled the building, Peter held the doors open to let others pass more quickly, even though it meant he couldn't escape himself in time. When Cruz appeared, Peter was still holding the door. The shooter saw him and opened fire, killing him instantly. Peter's bravery touched the hearts of millions. People called him a hero. A petition began circulating, asking for him to be honored with a military burial. And he was. Peter was posthumously awarded the ROTC Medal for Heroism, and on February 20th, 2018, he was given a rare posthumous admission to the United States Military Academy at West Point. Peter wasn't the only JROTC student honored. Elena Petty and Martin Duke, 2 other students killed that day, were also posthumously awarded the ROTC Medal for Heroism. They, like Peter, had their funerals with full military honors. A powerful recognition of the courage they displayed. Alyssa Al-Hadef was just 14 years old and had a bright future ahead of her. She was captain of the Parkland soccer club and deeply passionate about the sport. Nearly 3 weeks after the tragedy, on March 7, 2018, the United States women's national soccer team honored Alyssa before a match in Orlando. Her teammates and family were present and were given team jerseys with her name on the back, a tribute to the young girl who had dreamed of one day playing for the national team herself. Another story of heart-wrenching courage came from Meadow Pollock. Meadow was a senior who tried desperately to survive. She had already been shot 4 times and was crawling toward a classroom door, trying to escape. Alongside her was freshman Kara Logren, also wounded. Meadow, despite her own injuries, covered Kara with her body to try and protect her. The shooter returned to that room, found them, and fired again. Both girls were killed. Meadow died trying to shield another life. Her father later described her as a warrior, and few who heard her story disagreed. The loss didn't end with those who died that day. 18 others were wounded, 16 students and 2 teachers. The most critically injured survivor was 15-year-old Anthony Borges. He would become known as the real Iron Man. During the shooting, Anthony used his own body to block the door of a classroom, holding it shut while 20 of his classmates took cover behind him. He was shot 5 times through his torso and legs, but survived. His injuries were so severe that he remained in the hospital for nearly 2 months. When he was finally discharged on April 4, 2018, Anthony issued a public statement. He criticized the actions of the Broward Sheriff's Office, the school superintendent, and others who he felt had failed to keep the students safe. His family later filed notice of their intent to sue the school district to help cover the costs of his recovery. Anthony's bravery didn't go unnoticed. At the 2018 BET Awards, he was honored with a humanitarian award, and his story inspired thousands across the country. But surviving the shooting didn't mean the pain ended. For many students and teachers, the trauma lingered. Some experienced intense survivor's guilt. Others battled the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. In March 2019, just over a year after the tragedy, 2 young survivors died by suicide. Sydney Aiello, 19, was one of them. She had been close friends with Meadow Pollack. After the shooting, Sydney struggled to attend college. The idea of being in a classroom again terrified her. Despite treatment for PTSD and depression, the weight of her trauma became too much. Less than a week later, 16-year-old Calvin Desir, another student who had lived through the shooting, also took his own life. The trauma was not limited to students. Teacher Ivy Seamus, who lost 2 of her students, Nicholas Dworet and Helena Ramsey, while teaching a Holocaust history lesson, was deeply affected. In 2019, she received the first ever Stronger Than Hate Educator Award from the USC Shoah Foundation. During her acceptance speech, she tearfully honored her students' memory and spoke of the need for continued education about hate, violence, and compassion. As the investigation unfolded, the world learned more disturbing details. On May 30, 2018, prosecutors released cell phone videos recorded by Cruz before the attack. In them, he spoke coldly about his plans. He expressed excitement, hatred, and a desire for notoriety. The footage chilled those who saw it. It was undeniable. This massacre had been premeditated. The school district, meanwhile, focused on helping students and their families recover. Grief counselors were brought in. The state of Florida offered to pay for both funeral and counseling costs. On February 15th, the day after the shooting, police presence was increased at schools in nearby counties. It was a necessary move to ease tensions and prevent copycat threats. Just 2 weeks after the shooting, on February 28th, Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School reopened. Principal Ty Thompson made it clear. The focus was healing, not academics. The school day was shortened, backpacks were discouraged, and comfort animals were brought in to help students cope. Thompson tweeted, "Come ready to start the healing process and #reclaim the nest." Over the following months, new security measures were introduced. Students and staff had to wear visible ID badges. The number of entrances was reduced. Armed officers were stationed at each access point. Clear backpacks became mandatory. Metal detectors were discussed but never fully implemented. Many students criticized these changes, feeling they didn't address the real issues. As time passed, scrutiny turned toward the school district itself. An investigation by the Sun-Sentinel revealed that Broward County Public Schools had spent around $185,000 trying to downplay its failures. A private company was hired to review Cruz's school history, but their final report omitted troubling details. The district even fought legal efforts to release key documents. Despite the heartbreak, the school pushed forward. On June 3, 2018, it held its graduation ceremony. It was an emotional day. Diplomas were presented to the families of 4 seniors who had been killed: Nicholas Dworet, Joaquin Oliver, Meadow Pollack, and Carmen Schentrup. Principal Thompson began the ceremony with a dedication to "Those Not With Us." Graduates wore sashes reading #MSD Strong, and many decorated their caps to honor their lost classmates. Joaquin Oliver's mother accepted his diploma, wearing a shirt that read, "This should be my son." Talk show host Jimmy Fallon made a surprise appearance to offer words of support, calling the students some of the bravest people in the world. On the first anniversary of the shooting, the school held a special day of service. Attendance was voluntary. A moment of silence was observed at 10:17 a.m., and grief counselors were on hand. Therapy dogs comforted students, and a memorial garden project replaced the makeshift tributes that had covered the campus for a year. But the issue of accountability remained unresolved. Scott Peterson, the school's resource officer, was at the center of controversy. He had been on campus, armed and in uniform, when the shooting started, but did not enter the building. Sheriff Scott Israel said Peterson should have gone inside to confront the shooter. Peterson was suspended and chose to retire immediately. In June 2019, he was arrested and charged with 11 counts, including child neglect. Peterson maintained his innocence, saying he thought the shots were coming from outside. In June 2023, after a lengthy trial, he was found not guilty. Investigations into the police response revealed more failures. Some officers stayed outside. A captain ordered a perimeter to be formed against active shooter training protocols. There were delays caused by technical issues, including a 20-minute delay in viewing surveillance footage. Coral Springs police were the first to enter the building, but by then, Cruz had already escaped. In February 2018, President Trump criticized the officers who failed to act. He said he would have entered the building himself, even unarmed. The building where the massacre occurred, Building 12, stood for years as a grim reminder of the tragedy. It was used as evidence during Cruz's trial. But finally, on June 14, 2024, demolition began. The site was cleared by July 8th. For now, the ground will be covered with grass. One school board member, whose husband was killed in the attack, said she hoped it would become a space where life flourishes. Ideas for its future include a memorial field for sports and music, something that reflects the lives once lived, not just the lives lost. Nick Cruz's story continues even further in the interrogation room, and we will make a video on him right after this one. So stay tuned and subscribe so you don't miss out. I can't even find the words to express the interrogation. What are your thoughts on the video? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.